It ought to concern every person because it is a debasement of our common humanity. It ought to concern every community because it tears at our social fabric. It ought to concern every business because it distorts markets. It ought to concern every nation because it endangers public health and fuels violence and organized crime. I'm talking about the injustice, the outrage of human trafficking, which must be called by its true name, modern slavery.
Human trafficking, a global problem that has persisted for hundreds of years, is the third largest criminal industry in the world. The United Nations estimates that trafficking in persons generates $7 to $10 billion annually for traffickers. Only a mere decade ago has the international community shed light on the gravity of this crime. Nearly 27 million people are currently victims of forced labor across the world, trapped in jobs which they were coerced or deceived into and cannot leave. In response to this most severe form of human rights violations, CAMSA, the Coalition to Abolish Modern-Day Slavery in Asia, presently focuses on Southeast Asia, a hotbed of sex and labor trafficking. The ILO tells us that the Asia-Pacific region accounts for the largest number of forced laborers in the world, 11.7 million forced laborers. That's 56% of the global total. Not only are trafficking syndicates operating in these countries, but oftentimes government officials and state enterprises are complicit in human trafficking. Men, women, and children have been trafficked, sometimes with the government's involvement for labor and sexual exploitation.
A recent survey showed that more than 97% of mid-level officials surveyed in Southeast Asia viewed human trafficking as an important security concern for their countries. And yet, despite that statistic, governments in the main have not yet shown the political will to hold the traffickers accountable. Some focus solely on sex trafficking, but their efforts are then undercut by treating the women not as victims, but as illegal immigrant prostitutes or criminals. Forced labor cases are treated as administrative violations if they are addressed at all. And in some countries, structures are established and meetings are held, but no one ever seems to go to jail. Corruption, for instance, makes laws hollow at best.
Founded in 2008, CAMSA is a coalition of international and national organizations focusing on combating labor and sex trafficking committed or originating in Asia. CAMSA has conducted case interventions within the United States and its territories, Jordan, Russia, China, Malaysia, Vietnam, Taiwan, Cambodia, and Thailand. CAMSA's mission is to rescue and protect the victims of modern-day slavery while pressing governments to enact and enforce anti-trafficking laws and policies. Across the heavily populated Southeast Asia, hundreds of thousands of innocent migrant workers are caught in the web of labor trafficking criminals and syndicates. The majority of victims are tricked into leaving their homes for work abroad with the promise of a well-paying job that would allow them to support their families. Large placement fees, as demanded by labor recruitment agencies, leave many migrant workers in heavy debt even before they are sent abroad. Once they begin their new job, many soon realize that the pay and conditions are not what they were promised, thus dragging them deeper into debt with no way out. For the victims toil under horrible work conditions and receive little or no wages in industries such as fishing, food processing, and domestic work. Often, the traffickers will withhold their identification and travel documents as a means of control. The few who manage to escape are often detained with little or no support before deportation. In countries from Cambodia to Malaysia, slow and deficient court systems, law enforcement corruption, minimal financial and human resources, and the lack of victim-centered strategy to combat human trafficking made it exceedingly difficult to prosecute traffickers. As a result, the majority of trafficked persons do not have access to assistance or justice, leaving the traffickers free to exploit more victims. Women and children are trafficked in Southeast Asia for sex trafficking more than in any other area in the world. An estimated 200,000 to 225,000 women and children from Southeast Asia are trafficked annually, nearly one-third of the global sex trafficking trade. Due to the country's less stringent visa requirements, Malaysia is an attractive destination for sex traffickers to recruit women from abroad for work in the entertainment service industry. Vietnamese women, for example, are often recruited to work in karaoke bars and massage parlors in Malaysia. The recruiters would promise them high-paying jobs while offering to pay for airfare and all affiliated costs. The women are told they can pay back these costs once they start working. The majority of them enter Malaysia without a work visa. That ambiguous work in karaoke or beer pouring job would soon prove to be sexually exploitative, with employers controlling the woman's every movement during and after working hours. Their pay and passport are withheld. Those who wish to leave cannot unless they have the money to pay as dictated by the recruiters and employers. If unable to secure the necessary funds, they are forced to stay and work off their debt. The victims fall deeper and deeper into a trafficker's web of exploitation, violence, and deceit. Collaborating with local like-minded organizations, CAMSA builds capacity for civil society to rescue and assist victims, monitor law enforcement, and advocate for policy changes. CAMSA has set up a hotline number in Malaysia for victims to call for help or for concerned people to offer tips about trafficking rings. In Taiwan, CAMSA offers direct service to migrant workers while also working tirelessly to support and build the growing community of permanent resident Vietnamese foreign spouses. CAMSA employs a transnational model to work with and across governments to advocate for new laws and regulations aimed at the prevention of human trafficking and the protection of its victims. In 5 years since its founding, CAMSA has rescued close to 5,000 victims of human trafficking. Human trafficking is an ongoing issue that cannot be eliminated without the help of everyday individuals like you. No voice is too small, no act too insignificant. Whether it is sharing information with families and friends to protect themselves from becoming prey of the traffickers, or whether it is volunteering and contributing to CAMSA's efforts, you can help in the fight to abolish modern-day slavery. For more information, you can visit the CAMSA webpage or call one of our offices in Malaysia or Taiwan.